When I was thinking about what the topic of this talk should be, Mary and I were brainstorming earlier, it was early this year. The thing that came to mind is a topic that I hope will be relevant for all of you across the board, because it's something that's been really consistent in my career as a digital media journalist. I don't even know what I identify as anymore. So the thing that I was thinking about that led us to this topic was, what do all of these different media companies have in common? Obviously, I'm incredibly biased, and I think there's one standout news organization up there above all rest. But these are the ones that are sort of defining the space and defining the shape of the space. And for me, the thing that I could pick out when I imagine what I appreciate about these brands, what draws me to them, what I try to steal from those who are doing things really well, is that they understand their audiences. And that manifests in a lot of different ways, some of which we'll get into. But mostly, for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to talk about how they reach their audiences on emerging platforms, and that they're, especially us, this is Vox, this is an example of when Vox launched on Snapchat, taking ways of conveying the news, of doing what we do every day and putting it in new places, in new formats to reach people where they're actually consuming content. So the thing about audience as it relates to modern media and to digital media is that it's actually the core growth driver for the three elements that I spend most of my time thinking about, the three elements that actually make up the core of what a digital media company is. So that's the journalism, that's the business, and that is the product. And I mean that as both the tool set. Most modern media companies are also technology and software and ad serving companies, so the actual tools that we use, but also the product in terms of the end thing that the editorial teams are putting out that has utility for audiences. And talking about audiences, I know that my audience here is not only journalism students. How many of you are journalism students? Ooh, a lot of journalism students. How many of you think you're going to go into journalism right out of school? Hope. How many of you hope you're going to go into journalism right out of school? I mean, journalism is such an amazing thing to study because it allows you to be so diverse in what you explore. I've worn the role of being a product manager, I've been a product designer, I've been a project manager, now I'm doing operations. It translates very well to a lot of different things. I'm doing that in the context of media. I think I'm at a point where I could very easily go work at a tech company and do this stuff. But the point is that no matter what industry you decide to go into, tangential to journalism or not, having the right tools to understand and be nimble about where your audience is and where they're going to be in the future still matters more than ever. So I'm going to do a little bit of a flashback. I don't like to talk about myself a lot and do bios in talks, but something about being in Cal Poly, like everyone I'm going to talk to today, I'm going to dive into my history vault because it's relevant to this audience, and it's made me think a lot about what has my career trajectory been since I left Cal Poly, since I left the journalism department. I was here, I cannot believe that it's almost been 10 years, but much of my most exciting time here was in 2008. It was a good year to be alive. I was the second online editor of the Mustang Daily. I was the online and multimedia, I don't even remember. I was trying to brainstorm with Paul Biddick about like what the heck was I actually doing here. I was doing a lot of the stuff that touched the website. And I came in very happy-go-lucky because I had just come from my high school newspaper, believe it or not, where I had founded the newspaper with a team of people who were all self-taught in how to code and how to podcast and how to do videos. That was in 2007 we were figuring out how to do that. That was my only context at that point in time for what journalism meant. And then I was excited to come to college and elevate that and take it to the next level. My first day of sitting at the Mustang Daily, we sat down for orientation, and the workflow that we walked through for what my job would be was that we would, report, and we would do all of our drafts, and then we would copy edit. We'd just moved the newspaper from Quark to InDesign. I don't know if that matters for any of you. Holler, Brady. My job as the online editor was to copy and paste to the website at 11 p.m. So it was a big shift for me and a reality check on. That's not anything. That's like not to naysay Cal Poly in any way. It's a reflection of the state of the industry at the time when we were making big shifts and trying to figure out how do we do this in a way that is digitally native. So I was like appalled when I got here because I didn't know anything about print. This was my first exposure to print in my life, was coming to Cal Poly, even though I had been a newspaper reporter, a radio reporter when I was in high school. I did a website in high school. I had done all of this, but I came into this new mode of working here. So just to set the record straight, I remember a few years ago, I think I was at the Seattle Times in my last days there, and I got a Google News alert that made me spit my coffee out that said, as a student, Rabaino was one of the first to design the Mustang daily in WordPress. So I want to set the record straight on this and also give a little bit more history because it's relevant to our topic about audiences, is that we, at that time, our staff we did a lot. I feel like I'm very proud of what we did here, and I think it is something that carried on throughout my career, but we actually reinvented the way that the newspaper, the Mustang Daily, and even aspects of the journalism department were thinking about how the web fits into a lot of this. So by the end of my tenure, the onboarding doc looked a little bit more like this. You sit down to join the Mustang Daily staff, you learn that you're going to report and you're going to shoot video and photos, you're going to edit media in a bunch of different ways, then you're going to put it on the web. You're going to iterate on the web, and then maybe by the end of the night, we'll have something to put into the newspaper. I don't know how much of that still exists today, but that was the thing that I am the most proud of about our time at Cal Poly. And yes, I did make a website and I did design it also, but that was the very last step of a very long process to rethink how we did things. And what it was afforded to us beyond just a better design, we were really excited because we were able to empower what I just described. That new workflow was a workflow that without having our own tools and software, we would have never been able to achieve. We were able to innovate on new formats, which was really exciting. We were playing a lot around with like Flash and doing weird multimedia things back then, which we couldn't have ever done if we hadn't moved the site over. And we were liberated to try new technology. I'm gonna hop to the next slide real quick, just because I found this in a flashback. This is what it used to look like to put live video on the internet. I don't remember, this is somewhere on campus. We used to live stream talks, and to do that, the immense amount of setup and like navigating cords and wires, it was like some of the most stressful things I'd ever done here. But being on that platform allowed us the flexibility to try new technology that we had been constrained by before, and to figure out how do we actually sell advertising on our own platforms online. How do we bundle digital into print offerings? So during that time here was when we thought a lot about what does it mean to go digital first, and the reality of that is that we knew college audiences were online, and that we needed to be able to build an experience for them that mapped to that. At the Seattle Times, my big thing that I always had pushed for was if it doesn't work on mobile, it doesn't work. While I was there, I worked on a few different teams that were focused on building out multimedia sort of experiences to explain the news. We worked on different types of voting guides, different sort of interactive ways of budgeting balancing the budget to understand how the budget worked, everything all the way to sports and game centers, and our time there was focused on mobile first. So the theme, like the audience theme, at every major point, and I map it to my career, not to like toot my own horn, but I map it here because I think I've been involved with a lot of the key turning points or like aha moments in the industry in the past 10 years. But that was a big aha moment for us, that we needed to be thinking not just digital first, like we had figured out digital first. It was about mobile first. And now I'm at Vox Media. It's a company that I absolutely love and adore. This is a company that was started with bloggers. Like the whole nexus of the inception of Vox Media was from bloggers who the only thing they knew about was how to build audiences online. So all of the tools, all of the systems, all of the workflows were already digital first and already mobile first. But this was an interesting turn that we made as a company that we're still in the process of navigating now, which is what the rest of this talk is really going to focus on, is when I started working there, when I would give talks like this, I describe Vox Media as, it's a company, we have a bunch of lifestyle websites that are built for passionate audiences. And while that's still true, we made a little bit of a shift starting in 2015, and we're still living out the reality of this today. It seems subtle, but the tagline we use now is, we build smart brands that people love. What's the word that's missing? What's the biggest difference? The word website is gone. That seems like maybe just like a subtle marketing tactic, but that has fundamentally shifted the way that the entire company works. We are thinking more now about launching brands today than ever before over launching websites. So this chart is hypothetical, but it shows like the media mix of a typical sort of modern media company. The orange block up there represents the on-platform experience, which is the word I use to describe the website. You can see in 2015, that was a bulk of the traffic. In 2016, you see a ton of growth, but that orange bar is staying the same size. And 2017 is not done yet. That bar will continue to get bigger through the end of the year, but you see now that orange bar is getting smaller. Even though audience reach and content views are growing, they're becoming more distributed than they've ever been before, which is why building brands over building websites, like the website is becoming less and less important, which is what, in the previous slides I talked about digital first, I talked about mobile first. That was all focused on the website, the Seattle Times website, the Mustang Daily website, getting people to your website in the context that you would expect them to get there. But we're way beyond that mobile tipping point now. I think we're beyond that mobile tipping point as of 2014, where the number of global users for mobile exceeds the number of users who are using desktop. Smartphones and tablets account for 65% of digital media time spent. In the US, that number continues to go up really, really quickly. And of the people who are on their phones, 88%, that's a hugely overwhelming percent of that consumption is happening within mobile apps. And that's not happening through New York Times mobile app or San Luis Obispo Tribune mobile app. That's happening through places like Facebook, like YouTube, like Messenger. I don't need to rattle these off. You should all know what all of these apps are. This is where people are spending most of their media time today. So the idea of building a website has nothing to do with the reality of where audiences are consuming. And when people do land on your content within those experiences, more and more that's shifting away from sending you back to the website. The model used to be you would tweet and you would post on Facebook so that people come back to your site. It was about referring people back to the website. Now, Facebook has its own version of articles that are hosted within Facebook. They never even reach your website. Google has the same product. I'm not gonna rattle through all of these, but the point of this, if we're to go quickly through it, is to show that most of the places, that 88% where people are spending their time, never touch your media internet website.com. Which is all to say that I've said in more dramatic scenarios than this that websites are dead. That's not true. That's a dramatic way of saying websites are just less important than ever before. So the big shift that we made a few years ago at Vox Media, and you'll see it reflected in BuzzFeed and Axios and all of these big companies, is thinking more about off-platform first. Still considering the mobile aspect, still considering digital digital only is my reality. But off-platform first as the method of where you're thinking about how your audiences interact with you. So design is a huge part of what we do because increasingly mobile consumption is visual. And just to put this idea of off-platform first into real life context. So when we used to design experiences for our brands, the process from the ground up for designing was we would focus on what is the hierarchy of the typography, what's the button language, what might an article look like, what would a feature look like. We really would rebuild from the ground up a news consumption experience, mobile focused, digital focused, but it was always about our website and reinventing. When we made this shift to thinking about brands first, I was running the team that does all of the brand launches at the time. Curbed was our first big relaunch project. Curbed is our home and lifestyles brand at Vox Media, where we decided we were not going to think about the web experience in a redesign. We went through a whole redesign process and didn't touch a website until 2 weeks before launch. What we thought about in our very early stages were all of the touch points where people actually interact with and see your content. That's for Curbed, it was in the context of a Pinterest feed, or seeing Twitter cards distributed across Twitter, or seeing a podcast logo, podcast icon in the iTunes store. We started with all the places where the brand travels, because that's often going to be the only place where somebody will ever experience your brand. It's really funny, on our Vox YouTube channel, we once made a reference in the earlier days about like going to the website, and people were like, what website? I thought Vox was just a YouTube channel. Like, people associate the brand with the platform through which they experience it. So we have to think a lot more about the way that the brand travels, not just across many different platforms, but we're also making a big shift ever since we acquired Recode, which has a huge conference led by Kara Swisher and formerly Walt Mossberg, into how the brand identity translates to real life experiences. More and more, we're trying to figure out, how do you build a community outside of a digital presence, and we're trying to take that to different cities and different venues and experiences. So we had to actually design a design system that would live on a stage, in a pamphlet, on a t-shirt, behind Sheryl Sandberg at the Code conference. So our designers who had been web and digital designers had to remember, how do we think about print design? How do we remember like bindings to get printed for a conference notebook? We have to really push our idea of what a platform means. And then finally, at the very end of that whole process, we would focus on the website, which totally, again, turned the model on its head in anticipation of how do audiences actually interact with and use content. So we went from digital first to mobile first, off-platform first. I am constantly, my whole mission is chasing the audience, is finding the audience, following the audience, and building companies, processes, team structures that allow us to chase that audience. And we do that every day in really small ways. We do it in the big, broad ways that I described here, but we also do it, especially at the level of the journalist, in decisions we make about content every day. So a journalist today who is deciding, what article am I going to put up on Vox.com today, has to consider the atmosphere that we're working in, where they're competing for attention. And by this, I don't mean the Washington Post is competing against the New York Times, or the San Luis Obispo Tribune's competing against, I don't even know any other local papers here, I'm sorry. It's not about competing for attention within the typical competitive set. It's about competing for attention everywhere where people are using and thinking about digital. So that could be on Facebook, that could be what they're listening to while they're at the gym, or binge watching all weekend, last weekend with a bottle of wine, or playing on their PS4 with their friends. The competitive nature of attention is much more broad than just journalism. So the thing that we think about all the time is, how do we hook them and how do we keep them? So I'm gonna zoom way back out again and talk about the mission of a brand, because this when defined in a broad way, then translates to how a journalist every single day navigates the type of content they're gonna write and how they're going to write it. So having a very strong mission and having a really strong niche focus and point of view is so important for digital media companies. We can no longer just be like the source of truth for everything that happens in the known world, or everything that happens in a community. When we started Vox.com, we started all of our other brands, we had to have a really narrow focus that provided a sense of utility through which we could validate every piece of content that we create. Because that voice and that utility, that's the only thing that actually stays consistent platform to platform. If you think about a push notification in your feed, or seeing a Vox video on YouTube, or seeing it in Apple News for the first time, those formats are all completely different. The way that you interact with that's completely different. The only thing that you have to hold true to your brand, when we're not constrained to TV or to the idea of a newspaper, is the ethos for which you stand and the way that you express it. So that no matter where somebody finds you on the internet, or in real life or on their phones or via voice, they know what they can come to expect. It's really about creating a product out of the news experience. So for Vox, the angle we take, and this is the core driver of everything we create, whether it's hitting send on a push notification for your iPhone, or if it's creating a $100,000 to create a documentary where we travel the world, we're always thinking about it through the context of how do we explain the news. And that really does change the way that you think about framing a story. It changes the types of stories that we tell, but it also means that our audiences know what to get every time. And that's the only way to make this work when you're inundated with so many platforms that you have to hit, is that people have a consistent experience of you. They know that no matter where they find you, they're signing up for something that's going to be quality, and that we're delivering on that promise of the brand at every single touch point. Otherwise, when we're competing against Stranger Things and that cool album on Facebook, we're gonna lose every time. So high quality experience that's consistent. And then we have a lot of tools. Like, tools are more important than ever for reducing that complexity. So I'm gonna dive in and nerd out a little bit on some of the stuff that Vox Media has here, because it's relevant to the opening conversation about WordPress. But also I think it's just really interesting. So our creators, our journalists, are actually responsible. So translating that big mission, there's the mission of what is the angle, what is the lens through which we tell these stories. Translating that on a story-by-story basis. The creators are then responsible for understanding how those stories travel. A creator is not just writing an article, making a video, hitting publish, and then hoping a social media editor distributes it where it needs to go. The creators from the start have tools that reinforce their method or their mode in the process. So the tools are actually absolutely necessary for simplifying the media environment. So just to run you through the ways, a little peek behind the curtain of the tools that we use that allow us to reach our audiences everywhere. They're focused on creation and not just for the website. So we have a lot of different methods by which creators can define how does this exactly look on Facebook. When you're a writer and you're writing a headline, you have to write the headline for how it appears in a search result, how it appears on Facebook, how it appears on Twitter. The angle for Facebook is going to be totally different than the search result. The search result has to be optimized for questions that people are answering in the moment. The social media headline has to be something that somebody wants to click to say, like, me too, I'm smart, look, all my friends, I know this before everyone else. That's two completely different ways to approach the framing of a story. And our creators have to think about that for every single thing that they write or that they produce or that they create as a visual. And then in the process of doing that, visuals are tied more than ever to the creation. So our creators are not just like handing off an article and hoping somebody makes it look nice or puts a good image on it. A creator has to think about what are all the visuals, how do those visuals translate. The default preview mode in our story editor is a Google search result, because for the text-based content that's hitting our platform, that's how people are going to see it. So it's an AMP page. How many of you know what Google AMP is? All right, we're gonna talk to a few people about making sure you all know what that is. But Google AMP is like all the thing in digital journalism for digital media companies right now. It's a product that Google has developed specifically for news publishers, because news publishing websites have become inundated with advertisements, with sign-up forms, with all the stuff that slows down the page. So Google said, if the news industry is not going to fix this, then we are going to make a new version of newspaper or news publisher article pages that is fast, that loads very quickly, that does all the things that your broken websites don't do. So that is becoming like the main mode by which, if you search for like a news story on your phone, you'll see there's like a little lightning bolt next to it, and it might say AMP next to it. When a news article loads really, really fast on your phone and the URL doesn't match what the site is, you're being served a Google AMP page, which is the most I'll nerd about that for now. So we default to all of our previews to those types of pages. Our platform lets you know when when you're doing something that's not gonna work everywhere. Like Apple News doesn't support this type of video. You know what, if you put this in there, you're not gonna reach people on Apple News. So creators are always having to think now about what is the visual, what is the context, what am I including in this to tell my story, and is that actually going to reach everyone everywhere, which is, you might imagine, is kind of limiting in a lot of ways, but also empowering that you know that you're going to be able to create something that everyone's going to be able to access. Also to supplement the things that our creators need to make smart decisions, as we have a lot of data. We have a lot of really smart algorithms that surface insights right at the point when you need them about what your audience needs. So like in this example, for this story, the creator could get a notification that says, like, you wrote a similar story to this last week, and it got a lot of traffic, you should probably link them. Or a lot of people are coming to this article from Facebook, you haven't yet shared it on Facebook. You can really boost that organic traffic if you put it there. So the tools that we're creating help. They're sort of like a second brain to help make our editors, our reporters, our producers smarter about what they're doing and when they're doing it and why. But those people are also the ones who inform this. An engineer's not just sitting in a room alone dreaming up what the cool data tool is that will help an editor every day. There's a virtuous cycle by which the editors are engaged in that. They're aware of what their audience needs are, and they're thinking about efficiencies that they can unlock if they just had a tool to do it. So then we create this cycle whereby the things that were manual, that you had to do on your own, that were hard but valuable, you can build them into the system, and then you can free up time to figure out the next thing that's going to get you more audience. So that's a little bit behind the scenes on that. We also have a ton of awesome tools that also are creator inspired. Our editors used to do this really manual process where they would type a headline out, and then they would look at it on Chartbeat, and then they would tweak it a little, and they would just keep tweaking until they saw it really take off. Now we have a system that does that automatically. You can write your story, you can put in 7 headlines, you can put in 10 different images, and very quickly the algorithm understands which one's performing best. It's better than A/B testing. It's called multiband testing, and it works a lot faster. And so you can start to surface insights that originate on our website, but then you translate out to different places. So you can see the thing that I'm mapping in terms of the workflow for the creator, it's much more than just the creation. It always starts with the story. You have to have a compelling story, and you have to tell that story really well, but then you have to think about all the ways in which that story is going to be consumed, and you have to optimize for it. And we do the same thing with all of our video distribution tools as well. But I want to transition for a second to the business. The awesome thing about our tools and our workflow and this mindset about how important the audience is that it's fundamentally changing business models in digital media, especially for us at Vox. So the old way that this used to work is probably something that you're pretty familiar with. There was an article on the page, and that would be editorial content, and then maybe you had an ad inserted, and there was a clear division, like we're monetizing this, and the stories have to travel, and then we put ads around the stories, and we're directly monetizing traffic. That's the way that it still works that way, but we're shifting away from it now. So the line between the journalism and the revenue, which was very, very clearly delineated before, is actually going away. The new model is that we're building distribution channels. So Facebook is on that first chart I showed you with the big orange block at the front. All of those other little bands of data are different types of distribution channels. So we're no longer in this model where we're directly monetizing the traffic. You're building a huge distribution channel, so then you can channel ads into it. And this is important for journalists to know, which I will get to in a second, because I can see some of you zoning out at the business part, which you shouldn't be. So the new model is filling the channel with ads like this one. So this previous slide was an explainer we did about Syria. Obviously, like a very complex and hard topic, but yet we still managed to get millions and millions of views on this. One thing we do believe in at Vox Media is that substance can be viral, not just tasty videos or gifs of cats. We really do believe that, and it's proven in the numbers that when you go deep, people engage. And so this is how we're building huge audiences. We're creating really, really valuable journalism that people count on, and they take that step to hit like, to subscribe to your channel. The thing we're doing more and more of this year, more than ever, and we're just starting to unlock a lot of real value here, is then creating content on behalf of advertisers that does the same thing. So in this model, editorials in your stream, there's revenue in your stream, and they're not side by side in the way they used to be, where there was a clear line between the two. And what that means is we have to be very careful, and we have to create trust and respect to make sure that we're not duping people, to make sure we're not being unethical, to make sure that what we're creating on this revenue side doesn't impact the editorial side, but that we're still able to build a business model around the things our audience needs. So when they're in this context, both types of content, the editorial and the revenue, they have to speak to the same type of audience. If I'm subscribing to Vox's Facebook channel and all of a sudden I see an ad that's like totally off-brand and is not the kind of content I thought I was signing up for, that explain the news content, I'm going to unsubscribe, and I'm going to have a really bad view of Vox, and I'm going to stop sharing and evangelizing my friends. The thing about the new business model that we're unlocking is that you're still providing that same value. You still have to understand the audience. You have to understand how to reach that audience, the platforms that they're on, and create monetizable content that will hit them in that way. But the thing is, it has to be really good. Like, people are very smart and they see through shady tactics. So we've been working on a new thing that we just launched last week. I've spent a lot of brain space on, and the team doing it is so amazing. It's called the Explainer Studio, and this is a new revenue initiative that takes all of the best things that we did about building Vox, about building explainers, and turns that into a method for advertisers to also tell interesting stories. And I think what we're doing better than anyone, and I would love to see like the next generation of journalists and entrepreneurs continue to unlock, is figuring out a way to do this that just builds trust and value. So we have very strict rules about what qualifies as a branded content explainer. And those same rules for revenue were derived from the sort of value proposition of the editorial team. We would never do an explainer that explains why a product is awesome and why you should buy it. That's not an explainer. We would, as you saw on the other slide, do an explainer about a really complex algorithm that people interact with every day in their lives and always wondered, like, how the heck does Spotify get it right every single time? We would never do an explainer on why Ben & Jerry's is the best ice cream to eat and where you should buy it, but we would do an explainer. We just published this one last week about how the biology and psychology of just human existence predisposes us to love ice cream. And yes, Ben & Jerry's is a part of that, but the thing is, when you distribute that type of ad to a channel, it's still whimsical, it's still curiosity driven. It's really good content, and we've surveyed our audiences to understand, does it bother you when this kind of thing appears in your feed when you subscribe to a journalism feed? And they say no, if it's really, really good. And if it's clearly disclosed that this is an advertisement, somebody paid for this, this might be a biased opinion, then we're comfortable with that. It's about the transparency of knowing, and it's about having really good content. So the editorial team is, in this case, editorial innovation, like the ability for a really awesome set of reporters and video producers were able to shape an entire business line that's not only shaping how our company thinks and works, but also now how the industry is thinking about branded contents based on proven editorial formats. So I think that's really exciting, and for me that's like the first big parallel that I've seen. When I was in journalism school, I had a really hard time imagining like how my work would impact the business, but I did know that we needed to figure that out, and I knew it was important. For me, this is a very clear path. It's about like creating something that works, figuring out those proven formats, and then finding ways to unlock new value. So that was my business spiel. The question that I really haven't answered is, where will they be tomorrow? And like, how do you know where they'll be tomorrow? I honestly don't have the answer for what's next. We are constantly chasing this at Vox Media and trying to stay, and at all of the modern media companies, trying to understand where people are going and where we need to invest our time. But I do have a few tactics and tools that we use when we're evaluating. And these are kind of also like tips for what I wish I had known or learned about more when I was in college, because you still have time. So being data literate, just understanding how to interrogate data and learn. Like the best clues into where audiences are going, it's right in front of us. Like we have access to all the information about, when Facebook text-based views are dropping and we're starting to see a pickup in Facebook video views, like understanding that maybe there's something there that we should get ahead of. I was telling a class earlier wish I had taken more statistics classes, more data analytics classes, but that's gonna be the biggest insight. I think talking to people is another big one. We do user surveys. We try to turn qualitative data to quantitative. We engage with our audiences. I'm the annoying older cousin at the Thanksgiving table who turns to my teen cousins and says, "What apps are on your phone today? Like, how did you learn about what Trump is doing? How do you think about news?" Just being inquisitive about how younger people are thinking about consumption is really telling. I think taking any type of marketing class that will help you get better at any of this stuff is good. One thing we do a lot is we talk directly to our audience to understand how they work and how they think. We just hit 3 million subscribers on the Vox channel a few weeks ago, and we use that as a time to celebrate them. And we put out a survey where we use that to get more information from them about where are they consuming, like what do they see as next, what do they want from us, and where do they want to receive content from us. And we put this survey up, and we incentivized by allowing people to vote on the topic they wanted us to cover, and the one with the most votes we would do a video on. But having real feedback loops with an audience is also just a really helpful way of gauging where they are, where they want you to be, how they think of you. So it's a big part of what we do. Sharing what you learn is also key. I am a huge stickler for documentation, for knowledge shares. Doing this in a workplace, especially the young people who are the fresh eyes that come into a workplace, I think the biggest value that I brought to all the companies I came to when I first started was just this hunger to learn about what they know, to share what I know, and to write it all down. It seems like a really simple thing, but has a ton of value in both institutional organizations and brand new organizations that are on the cusp of trying to figure this all out. Having centralized knowledge repositories, because all this stuff is changing. What Facebook values today on their platform in a video is totally different than what it was in our conversation 6 weeks ago about how to reach audiences on Facebook. It was short sound off videos that have text. You've probably seen a lot of those if college kids are even on Facebook anymore. I don't even know. How many of you are use Facebook every day? Actually, how many of you use Snapchat every day? Yeah, see. But Facebook is still where the olds are, so that's what we're using to create content. And 6 weeks ago, it was small, snackable stuff. We're already seeing a shift. Facebook has changed something on its algorithm where they're surfacing, and thus people are engaging more with the longer form content that has a little bit more depth, which is aligned with the types of content we're creating. So everything I've outlined here, being able to keep an eye on that data and see wait, why are our numbers dropping off? What's going on? And understanding those shifts helps you change your content approach to map to that. The documentation, this is just a photo from the documentation days that we run. We like to get everyone together, just host it at someone's home, hole ourselves up for a day, and just write down everything that we've learned this month about different platforms, and then share that with other teams. And that's how you sort of keep that virtuous cycle that then informs the business, how you keep that going. This is the part some people would think is boring, but this is my whole life and I love it, is really thinking about prioritization. When you're inundated with 20, 30 different platforms that are always changing, their algorithms are evolving, a company, especially a company with 1,000 people like mine, has to be able to give clear direction about where we should be investing our time and where we should be cutting stuff out. You can't do everything on every platform all the time, always. You have to make judgment calls. You have to have a very clear understanding of what type of value ladders into what type of thing that's important for your company. So that's something I think a lot about. And then just not being afraid to try, to fail fast, and to experiment. How much time do I have? Because I want to do a sidebar on, we have 10 minutes left, so we should do questions. The thing I will say about experimentation, I won't go through the slides on this, is that I hear a lot of people in media organizations say, oh, we tried that thing for a year and it didn't work out. Guess it was an experiment, let's cut it. I think that the value that you all can bring when you go into a company is to really think about experimentation a different way. Experimentation is not just an excuse to do something that doesn't work. Like, go back to your 4th grade scientific process classes. Like, every experiment that you run, if you're gonna do it, has to ask a question, has to involve research and a hypothesis, testing of that hypothesis. I'm not gonna go through like this exact example because we're out of time, but keeping in mind, like, I would much rather hire a student out of college who has a portfolio for me of like the 10 experiments they ran, what they learned from it, what their hypothesis was, like how it was validated and how they fundamentally like changed something, than, you know, a portfolio of clips of their work. That's just me because I'm like biased toward people who actually like to try different things. But like, keeping the scientific process in mind is really important when you think about experimenting. Never stop learning. That's the thing that everyone at Vox Media is expected to do, is continue learning, trying new things, trying new production styles, taking classes after college. And the thing that has stuck with me through all of it, like still I'll live by this since my Cal Poly days, is just to learn by doing. So we have 10 minutes for questions. I tried to talk so fast.
Curious of, you know, Vox being so digitally focused, what the typical role of like a reporter in Vox is.
Interesting, the nature of that question. So the question, if you all can hear it, is if Vox is so digitally focused, what's the role of a reporter? Reporters still do stuff on the internet. No. Like, so I don't know, want to ask the question a different way?
Yeah, I guess. Just like when you were saying in the earlier class, like engineers and like collaborative people will sit down, like, is a reporter included in that? Do you send people out to, like,
Yeah, I get that. Now I understand that question. So the role of a reporter at Vox is still like the role of a reporter that you're all learning about. Like, people who have to be able to track down really interesting stories, cultivate relationships and have sources, like understand their audiences and like fundamentally tell stories that matter. They still have to be really good writers, or more and more we're looking for journalists who can also be good on-air talent. But the fundamentals of storytelling are all still there. There is space and time, though, carved out just to try the other things. Like in the visual comms class this morning, we were talking a little bit about the creative like design and brainstorm process for a certain type of story, which is like the online multimedia, like multifaceted package that has engineering and design support and all of that. I would say that's like 5% of our stories. It's a very small amount, but those are the ones that end up being the most prestigious, or the ones that get the most repeat traffic back over and over again because they're so evergreen. But the role of the reporter, the fundamentals are all the same. The ways by which you do it, like some of the examples I outlined here, it's not just file your copy and go. It's like file your copy and keep an eye on how it's doing, and like also write 10 different versions of it, and make sure you're writing it, maybe writing a script for the video that goes with it too, or working with someone who can do that to also get a video version up where it makes sense. So it's the fundamentals are all there. They're just applied in a lot of different ways.
So kind of based off of Erica's question then, for a lot of your digital content that you have on your social platforms, like, are those specifically made by designers and social media content creators, or are those kind of expectations for all reporters to make that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the kinds of stuff that you might see on our social channels range from, we'll post articles. There are probably a series of graphics. We do a lot of video these days. It varies based on like the brand and the skill set, but we typically have teams that are dedicated to having the tools and capacity to do the visual aspect of it. So trying to think of a good example is like, for say like a big package on The Verge or something, the reporter would do all the reporting and would work really closely with the visuals editors on defining that language. And then the reporter is responsible for sort of crafting or pulling out the pieces of that would be good for more visual social distribution, and then handing that to like a social designer or a video producer. So there's a lot of collaboration. It's not always though the like reporter who is doing the video. But in some cases it is. Like we have a lot of really talented people who can do it all. And sometimes the reporters are the people who are shooting the photos, who are editing the video. It just depends a little bit. Yeah.
I had a question about those monetized posts. It seems like a really interesting way to integrate advertising into an actual story. How much do people actually engage with those posts versus a standard story? Is it the same? Is it a lot less because they see that sponsored tag? I'm curious how that works.
Yeah, we've done a lot of, this is one of the things that I track obsessively. So far, we aren't seeing any major red flags about people not interacting with it if there's a sponsored post. We do see some net interaction rates that are lower, and I can often point that to it just being like bad content. Like we had one example where a reporter was like, oh my goodness, sponsored content's killing all our engagement, we can't put it up. And when you look at it, it's like it was posted on Labor Day weekend at like 8 p.m. Like anything you post at that time, you know, wouldn't do well. So what I'm keeping track of is just like over time, the whole story of like, is this really impacting us? So far, we're seeing that when the content is really, really good and it uses the same programming tactics, like post it at the time of day you would post content, like targeted in the same ways with the same thoughtfulness about the headline and the copy, it actually performs about the same. Bad content is bad content, whether it has a bug on it or not, it just doesn't do well. Yeah.
So are you guys kind of just at the mercy of when Facebook or Snapchat change their algorithms?
Yep.
How long does it take to catch up once they do something?
We move pretty fast because we're proactive. Like as soon as we start to see something happening, we experiment. We like define a hypothesis and move fast. Unfortunately, that is like the downside to all of this is we are a little bit at their mercy. If Facebook decides we're not going to allow any news publishers to publish in Facebook, there was speculation about this last week, and the only way to distribute your content on Facebook is if you pay money for it, like that is very, very difficult for us. That puts us in a situation where we have to fight for ourselves. So one thing that we've done that Vox Media is actually really uniquely positioned to do, because we are also a technology platform company, is we've built up a whole team of people. This is like a real job that exists at Vox Media called partner management. We have a group of people who are dedicated. There's a person dedicated to managing our relationship with Google, with Facebook, with Twitter. We have a whole team of them for every platform, and their entire job is to understand how our traffic or how our content is performing on those platforms, hear sort of the murmurings from around the company, from people who are like, why this thing isn't working in the way we would want it to, like Facebook is messing with our workflow. And we actually proactively have relationships with Facebook where we say, hey, we need to change this product to work in the way that we want it to work. We're meeting with them pretty regularly as partner managers to like try to shape and define that future with them. I don't know, like it feels like it's working, like sometimes we have wins there and sometimes we don't, but we've built a whole discipline around making sure Facebook does things that are in best interest of the industry. Yeah, I think we're almost at time. Want to do last one? Yeah, this question came up earlier. I think statistics, is it going to bye? Thank you. I would have taken more statistics classes. There was a point in time where I would have said that I would have taken more like software engineering classes. I think that could still be interesting, but now the industry has sort of matured to a point where it recognizes it needs to hire engineers. So like at Vox Media at least, there's not really as strong of a need for journalists to necessarily know how to do that. I would probably, what were the answers that I said earlier? Who was listening? Entrepreneurship, there was one. I took one entrepreneurship class while I was here, but I think I would have taken way more business classes just to understand the ways in which industries evolve and what motivates that. What else? More design classes. More women's and gender study classes. Like more, as a journal, like more classes, more things that like open up your point of view on the world. Because like that's also what journalism is about, is being able to understand those viewpoints and like find stories in a lot of different ways. So more diversity is good. Yeah.
So I understand how you would get to know an audience once you have the audience, but if you have something where the audience isn't built yet, how would you get to know?
That's great. Yeah, that's a really good question. We've hit that before. You know, Vox. I was at the company when we started Vox.com, and that started net zero. We had good talent. So the thing that has always driven all of our brands started somewhere. All of our brands started with basically nothing, and the thing that built their authority and their credibility was really passionate voices. So people who understand a topic really well, have a good point of view on it, and are willing to express that point of view in a lot of different ways that like reacts to the audience needs. To be completely honest, another way that's really big right now, we're exploring like spinning up this other thing that I'm consulting on with a company, and we're telling them to start from scratch, define a mission, like have that one point of view that's going to start to build what you're recognized for. And it's going to take time. Like the return on investment for that kind of thing is like a year to build a really solid Facebook page. But you have to understand the mission, understand the audience. You have to understand every point of view that your content can take and channel it to that. And then you have to like buy paid media. Like that's another thing, is like you have to pay to advertise for it, which we also have a really great product for that I won't bore you with. But it's a combination, just understanding your audiences, having that clear viewpoint, and marketing it. All right.